And we're live! Welcome to RockSim Live. I am Tim Van Milligan, and I am getting situated here behind my desk. RockSim Live is about RockSim software and the RockSim Pro and the Launch Visualizer. And I'm glad you're here today. It's a beautiful day in Colorado. Too bad we don't have a launch tomorrow. I might have to make my own. If you haven't checked in yet, we are live. We have the chat going, and you can go ahead and state your name and where you're watching from. I'd love to recognize you. For example, we have Terry Wheelock here, and Alfred Indy, and Jeff Gordotowski that have already checked in and are saying hello. And Mark Sell from Parker, Colorado. Now, Mark, he emailed in a question. It was actually two questions. And then I printed it out, and then I left it on my desk. But I think I remember them. So we'll answer Mark's questions. We have Jeff from Los Angeles. Cool. And Alfred Indy says he is from Michigan. I assume the microphone's working because people are hearing me and they're already chatting. And cool. Let me share my screen. So if you are brand new to this channel, this is the Apogee channel, and every Friday we try to do a RockSim Live where we talk about how to use RockSim. And if you don't know what RockSim is, if you go to the ApogeeRockets.com website, this is what it looks like. On this website, there's this banner bar here. You can click on that, and that will take you to RockSim. If that's not showing up, you just kind of have to scroll through it. It also has the Launch Visualizer, and this is actually going to take you to a different website where the Launch Visualizer lives. But if you want to know more about RockSim, you go to How To and Guides. And on this menu page right here, come down to Software over here on the left-hand side. Click on that. There's where you can download a free 30-day trial. There's also where you can purchase it. A little bit about RockSim, its history, the version history, the frequently asked questions, system requirements. We just noticed that there's a new version of Apple's operating system. I forget what the name of it is. I think it's 10.14 or 10.16. And we did test out the current version of RockSim, and it seems to run just fine. There was one little hiccup when you go to load engines. The screen doesn't refresh properly. But if you just kind of like resize the screen, then everything just kind of fills in like it should. Whenever they release a new operating system, they're always breaking our software. I wish they'd get their operating system right, because our software was working until they got a hold of it. But it does work. Everything works. That's the only little hiccup that we've noticed. And it's, like I said, the workaround is you just resize the screen. And then it will, basically like this. You just kind of grab the corner or grab an edge, just like that, and then it will refresh. We are doing RockSim Live training right now, which is down here underneath the video tutorials. If you click on that, it will take you to our archives and about the things that we talked about last week. We talked about, do you believe in aliens? How to design a flying saucer, and some of the new features of RockSim Pro. And I saw that Alfred Indy was talking about the new Pro version that I was showing last week, and yeah, it's really cool. And I was thinking about that this week. We haven't released RockSim Pro, that new version yet, and really, I can't think of a reason why we shouldn't just release it right away. Because people that use RockSim Pro are on a monthly subscription, and they should have the latest features as soon as I get them available. As soon as I prove them out that there's no bugs. But we were going to call it RockSim Pro, you know, the newest version, which we're on version 3, and so we would have to call it version 4. And then under RockSim, some of those features will migrate into RockSim, and then we'd go from version 10 to version 11. But I think I'm going to try to get RockSim Pro version 4 out as soon as I can, even though we're not done adding all the features. I was talking with the programmer this week, and we added another new feature, but I don't have it in my version yet. So anyway. Okay, so Cat Servant says, just because an app works doesn't mean there's nothing wrong with it. That's true. I've uncovered many a bug in my own software as a result of something changing in the OS that was previously obscuring the bug. That's true too. But I always hate when they release a new OS, either Windows or Mac, because it requires extra work on us. It's kind of like, for what benefit? You know, they release all these new operating system upgrades, and it's like, do you use any of the new features? Probably not. Anyway, so thank you, Cat Servant. I'm a cat servant too. My cat, if she was here right now, she'd be in my lap. I don't know why they do that. Anyway, let's get into RockSim, because Marcel had a question, and his question was, he had loaded new motors into RockSim, and the motors weren't organized properly. So they were mixed up. So there were small motors, then big motors, then some small motors. So they were kind of jumbled. And there's an easy, quick fix for that. So if I went to this rocket motor here, and if I click on, so this is how you load an engine. You know, you click on the button over here at the top left. It looks like the bottom of the rocket with like these are arrows pointing downward at the blast deflector. And then that opens up this screen, which is the simulation properties. And then the first screen is where the motors get loaded. So with this rocket is a two-stage rocket. So here's the upper stage, here's the lower stage. And you can tell by the little icon here, this is showing the topmost stage, and this is the bottom one. And if there was a third stage, it would be below here. If you double click on the row, or you click down here at choose an engine, it will bring up the engine selection screen. And so this is where he was seeing jumbled up motors. So there were small motors up here and small motors down here, and they're all mixed up. So the easy way to fix that is you just go to the column header up here at the top, and you just click on it. And then that reorganizes things. And it sorts it by smallest to biggest or biggest to smallest. So if you, like right now, I've got it sorted by biggest to smallest because I'm seeing the half A engine down here at the bottom. So that kind of tells me that the big ones are going to be at the top. So here's my D9. And if I click on it again, it just resorts it from smallest to biggest again. Now, sometimes, yeah, that worked. And if you want to sort it by alphabetical, you know, just click over here. You can sort it by alphabetical with Aerotech at the front and Quest on the bottom. Another one that's useful to sort by is total impulse, because sometimes even though it says it's the biggest motor, there might be one up here that might be a little bit more total impulse. Like here's like for example, this says it's a D3, but it actually has more total impulse than the D24, because the 24 is the average thrust. It's not the total amount of power. So that confuses a lot of people. So if you're interested in total power, that's called total impulse, and it's measured in Newton seconds. And then here's the average thrust in newtons, And you'll notice that some motors aren't named quite properly. Like the D24, it should have an average thrust of 24, but it only has 14. Here's a good one, a D2.3. That one has 2.1. So that one's a lot closer to its name than the D24. So you can't always tell by the name. Here's a good one. The Quest C18 is actually an 18 newtons average thrust. So that's a good one. That one's named properly. But like I said, some of the motors aren't named quite right. Like a D20 actually has an average thrust of 16, according to RockSim. 17, you can round it up. But the manufacturers have some leeway in making up the names, because sometimes they have multiple motors that have the same name. Aerotech has some motors. I know Quest has some motors. I think, not Quest, Cesaroni has some motors. A number of motors that are named the same. And it's like, it drives you nuts. And the difference between the motors is the color of the flame. Like one might be a blue, one might be a white. Which is kind of confusing. Okay, so if you have any more questions, go ahead and ask them. Mark Sell had a second question on the North Coast Archer kit that was in the database. And so let's go find that, see if we can duplicate what he's seeing. So to open up an existing design, come up here to the top. You can either go File, Open, or just click on the File button here, and that will bring up this list. And it should point you back into the Designs folder. So on the PC, it's under your C drive, Program Files /x86, RockSim 10, folder called Designs. And in the folder called Designs, we have all these other manufacturers. And there's dozens of manufacturers, and then within each manufacturer there could be a lot of different kits. And so he had a North Coast Rocketry, so I'll go to the North Coast Rocketry folder, open that, and I think he said the SA-14 Archer, and he says it was showing up as a Lance Beta. Let's see. So whenever you open one, it asks you if you want to save your changes, and I'm going to say no. Okay, oh, it says Lance Delta. Okay, so this is an Archer. So let me show you that's an Archer. So if I go to the Apogee website, and if I go to the search bar, this is the easiest way to find kits. You just go to the search bar and you just start typing in the name, and it will pre-populate things with that name. So if I click on it here, and I can see the Archer, and I'll just show you this image here. So you notice the big fins down here at the bottom, and it's got these strake fins right here, and then a nice long nose cone. So that's what the Archer looks like, and you can even see the name right here, SA-14 Archer. And if I go back to RockSim, yeah, that's an Archer. And so North Coast Rocketry used to have a kit called the Lance Delta. I think they might call it Lance Beta or Lance Delta. Let's see, Lance Delta. So right here. So if I open this one up, come on, open. There we go. See, this is definitely a different shape than the one that's over here. And so how does that happen? How does they get a different name? Well, I'll tell you how that happens and how to fix it. What happens is when a new rocket kit is made, such as this SA-14 Archer, what a lot of manufacturers do, I don't know if you noticed, but the Lance Delta and the SA-14 Archer, they look pretty similar except for the size of the fins and the location of the fins. Like here we got these little fins up at the top and bigger ones at the bottom. And if I go back to the Archer page, you know, the only difference is the fins, the tube and the nose cone, and everything else on the inside of the rocket, they're pretty close. Little secret here. For example, you could look at the length, 47 inches and a diameter of 2.64. And if I go back to the Lance Delta, length 47 inches, diameter 2.64. So basically, they took the same kit and they just changed the fins, changed the decals, give it new instructions, give it a new name, and they have a new product. And so when they create the RockSim files, that's kind of, they do the same thing. They'll take an old kit like the Lance Delta, change the fins, and then rename it. So that's what happened here. This was the Lance Delta that they just took the file, saved it under a new name, and then changed the fin shape. So to correct this, what you do is you go here to the Rocket Design Attributes tab right over here. And then you'll see the name Lance Delta. So what you do to change this name right here, when you change it here, it will change it down here. So I can change it to SA-14 Archer. And as soon as I hit the tab key, it should update right here, which it did. And then if I save it, now the next time I open it, it will say SA-14 Archer. So I know it can be confusing. We don't, a lot of the RockSim files that are in the database, so when you go to the database of the designs, all these kits right here, we're not the manufacturer of the kits, and we don't typically make the files for the kits. The manufacturer, one of our secrets here at Apogee Components, and if you ever start a rocket company, we will give you a copy of RockSim so that you can make your own RockSim files, and we'll put them in our database, and we'll do that for free, but you got to do the work of creating the files. So a lot of these kits that you see in here were made by other manufacturers. Now the ones that we make ourselves, if you look in Apogee Components in that folder, or the Dynastar folder, because that's one of our brands as well, these kits that we've made here. And if I open that up, you know, and now I've got the Aerodactyl here. Come on, update. And then if I go to 29 millimeter two-stage, look at that. That should be called the Aerodactyl. See if I show it in here. Because the reason this happened was we didn't have a name for the kit when we were designing it. And so it was called the 29 millimeter two-stage. That was kind of the working name. And then we changed it to Aerodactyl. Aerodactyl. And it's actually TS. The TS stands for two-stage. And then under More, you'll see rocket designer Tim Van Milligan. So I sign mine that I make when I put them in there. So that way when people are going to yell, they know who to yell at. So in the Aerodactyl, it was called 29 millimeter two-stage. So I'm going to save this one again. So basically, we don't make all the designs, and so errors creep in. It's the same with the rocket motor files themselves, the engine files. We don't make motors, so we don't have the thrust curves for them. So there is sometimes errors can creep in that we're unaware of. We don't know. Okay. So are we now? Any more questions? Terry Wheelock says, ooh, I'm a rocket building company. Well, Terry, let's see a catalog. If you got a catalog, you got a free copy. Mark Sell says, the RockSim file for the Lance Delta says 56.25 inches long. Another error. Let's go back. Let's see. Designs, North Coast Rocketry, Lance Delta. It says 56.4 inches for 4. Cool. Another little error creeping in. Yeah, so where's the error? So that tube right there, how long is that tube? So if I double click on that tube, it tells me that tube, let me make this a little bigger, is 34 inches long. I don't know where the error creeped in. It's either, it's got to be, you know, the length that RockSim calculates is the bottom of the tube to the tip of the nose cone. So it's either the nose cone, this tube right here, that's a coupler, this tube or this tube, because there's only 3 tubes. So one of them is wrong. I don't know. Yeah, see, the rocket designer didn't sign his name. And why did he put a star here by North Coast Rocketry? I don't know. I'm sorry, Mark. I don't know how that error, and I don't know how to fix it because I don't know which tube is incorrect. But you're right. It is too long. He must be playing around as we're talking here, so that's really cool. He must have split screen going on. Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. Mark Sell says, the body tube length is 10 inches too long in the RockSim file. So I'm assuming he means this one. That is 10 inches too long. So if it's 34 inches, it might be in real life 24 inches. You see what happened there? I changed the length of the tube, but the fins did not move with the tube. I can show you how to correct that while we're waiting for questions. So enter your questions here. We want to see them. So what happened was the fins are located, you know, the dimensions, you know, there's dimensions up here. It's measured from the front of the tube instead of the back of the tube. And if we would have changed it from the back of the tube, this would have moved with the tube. So if I open the fins, I can show you that. Come on, double click on them. And let me make this a little bigger. Okay, so where you change that is right here. It says the location of these fins are 21.25 from the front of the owning part. And the part that owns it, which means the parts that they are connected to, is this body tube. And so you'll just go here to the drop down and say from the base of the owning part, and you'll see that the fins didn't change location, but the location changed. So now they're minus 9.25 from the base. That means they're measured from that point there to that point there is 9.25 inches. So going this way is a negative because we're measuring from the back. But I can change that real quick just by changing the location to a 0 and then hit tab, and you can see they jumped right to where they should be. And if I click OK, and then if I edit the tube, you can double click on the tube, or you can find the tube up here, body tube, that one there. And why is this not remembering the size that I made it? So now if I change the length of this tube, you'll see now the fins are traveling with the changes in length of the tube. So if you want your fins to follow your tube, whenever you change your tube length, do that. I'm not going to save these changes, so say no. Okay, so now we're at 47.1961 inches, and so now we're a lot closer. So probably the nose cone at this point is off a little bit, probably because RockSim can't draw a radius to nose cone, so it's usually rounded at the tip. So it's measured from this point, where in real life it's probably measured like back here somewhere. If you can see that on my screen, I hope you can. Okay, where the motor tube is also too long from actual. Marcel says, if I remember correctly, the motor tube is also too long from the actual. Yeah, so he's saying that this motor tube is longer than what you actually get in the kit. So we're showing a length of 12 inches. And if I go back to the website, if I go back to the Archer page, I don't think this is going to tell me the length of the tube, but maybe if I look at some of the pictures. Gauging, here's the motor tube, and we could probably find the length of that tube. And I would say they're pretty close. So in RockSim, if I find the length of that tube, save my changes, no. This tube, right, not there, right there, that body tube says 10 inches. And the motor tube, I think we said it was 12 inches. So I would say that's 12 inches or 10 inches. Change that one dimension there, hit tab. You can see that motor tube got a little bit shorter. That makes it a little bit more accurate, which is totally fine. I'm going to save it. Why not? So thank you, Mark, for pointing that out. Yeah, so we've been gone like 28 minutes, and we've answered maybe 3 questions. So bring in your questions. I'd love to hear them. Troy Armit says, I love that North Coast Archer. Yes, it's a nice kit. It's a good high quality plywood fins. We sell it. We sell it pretty good. A little secret on that is that North Coast gets their parts from Aerotech. So it's an Aerotech nose cone, Aerotech tubes, but he puts all the internal stuff North Coast makes. Fatbank says, is there an optimal length for a motor mount tube? Well, define optimal. You know what I forgot? I forgot my water. I'm getting thirsty. Terry Wheelock kind of answered the question. He says, nope, it depends on the design. So yeah, and that's what I was asking about. How do you define optimal? You see, when you put a motor in here, let's load a motor. This is going to be a 29 millimeter motor here. Choose an engine, and let's sort the columns by length. So at the top, our shortest one is an F27, and our longest one is 20 inches. Holy cow! But those are Sky Rippers. Those are they're that long because they're hybrid motors. And that includes the propellant and the oxidizer tank. So that it has a big oxidizer tank in there. So that can be typical. But the longest one that is a solid propellant rocket motor is this Cesaroni. And there's a bunch of them that are 14.37 inches long. So let's start by putting in a short one, which is the 3.26 inches, and click OK. And you can see back here, I'll click OK here. You can see back here that we have this motor tube, which is right here, and we said that was 10, cancel, come on, it's 10 inches long, and then we have a 3-inch long motor in the back here. But there are a couple of centering rings. Your motor mount needs those centering rings. And this fin, the colors on this are terrible. And like I said, I didn't make this design. So let's start changing some colors so we can see things. So I'm going to change the color of the fins. Instead of blue, let's make them green, so we can see some things on the inside. And then click OK, and then let's go to the centering ring. So that's that centering ring there. And let's make that a purple, or that color there. And let's make this other centering ring. Let's make that one also that color, magenta. Click OK. So now if we look at this, you can see the fin is green, and it's got a fin tab right here. And so these centering rings, they're not quite placed where I would place them, unless, let me go back to the website here, just see if we can see the centering rings. Okay, so on his centering, he does have cutouts for the tabs on the base of the fins. So that's why these centering rings, this back one is not at the back edge. You typically, on a solid ring without any cutouts in it, it would go right behind the tab of the fin. And the tab on the, oops, what happened there? The tab on the fin is this green line right there. So that one's, why is it doing that? So that ring is in the right spot. This ring right here probably should be back here. So if I edit that ring, and just make this bigger so you can see it. Let me zoom in there. Let me grab this. Okay, so here's that ring. Right here is the tab. So I'm going to slide the ring back to about right there, probably where it should go. And then he's got this third ring right here. And this ring, I would put all the way at the front. So these rings right here, this ring that I've got highlighted and this ring back here, are actually to help align the fins. But they also help keep the motor tube concentric in the rocket. And then this front ring right here, I would move towards the front right here. And the reason for that is because typically that's where the shock cord is anchored. And if I move it forward, I can have a shorter shock cord in there, and that saves a little bit of weight. And it also reduces the volume inside of the tube that the ejection charge has to pressurize in order to push the nose out. Without the ring right there, the volume that has to be pressurized is from the back of this bulkhead right here. So this is on the back of the coupler. And then it has to pressurize all the way back over to here. But if I move that ring forward, let me move that ring forward. Let me see if I can see it in 3D. I can't see it in 3D because the tube is, let me see here, 3D. Okay, so here I've got it kind of translucent. So there's a bulkhead right here. And then here's the bulkhead here at the back. And you can see I've got to pressurize from here to here. And the smaller the volume you can make that, the less ejection charge you need, or the ejection charge that you have becomes a little bit more powerful, which will really push your parachute out. You know, you want it to come out. So that's why I would move that ring further forward. So if I open up the ring, look at it in 2D just so I can see it, and then slide it forward to here, right about there. And I don't always go right all the way to the edge of the tube. And the reason for that is I want to put a wood glue fillet right here to make that a really strong joint. So I'll have a fillet here on this side of glue and a fillet here on that side of glue. If I move the ring all the way to the front, right there, I can't get a fillet of glue right there. So it's a little bit weaker of a joint. So that's my little tip, is to, you know, when you're putting your front centering ring on, don't put it all the way at the edge of the tube, just a little bit back. Even a 1/16 of an inch will make a big difference. But an 1/8 of an inch is like fine. And any further back, then you're increasing the volume in here. Yeah, so on this rocket motor, on any motor tube, you only need 2 rings. So I know I need these 2 rings right here. I need this one here, and I need that one there, because that aligns the fins. So those are for fin alignment, and they serve the double duty of aligning this tube. So this ring right here and any length of tube up here is really extra. As long as you don't need to have that ring far enough forward to pressurize that tube. There are some cases when you have really long rockets that are big in diameter that you really need to move that ring forward. A good example is the Apogee Saturn V kit. So if I go here to the Apogee website, and if I type in Saturn V, there's a Saturn 1B, Saturn V. This is a big rocket, and it's got huge volume inside of it. This tube right here, I think, is like 36 inches, and it's like just about 6 inches in diameter. It's pretty close to, so it's got a lot of volume in it. And so you see the motor tube, this tube right here, is really long. We're going to have a ring at the bottom and a ring at the top. And so the only area that the ejection charge has to pressurize is this area, like from here to here, instead of from here to here. So there are some things that you have to keep in mind as you're designing rockets, you know, in where you're putting that front centering ring. On a 2.6 inch diameter kit, you probably don't need it because the volume inside of here is pretty small. I wish last week we were talking about some of the new features in RockSim Pro that's coming out. And one of the features is an ejection charge calculator. And so I don't have that installed on this computer, so I can't show you. But if I had it on here, I could show you the volume difference of having that ring from here or moving it or eliminating it altogether. And then you could see how much black powder is needed to pressurize it. And the rocket motor has, this is a really good question. Maybe I'll take this up next week, because it would be a really good advertisement for the program. If your ejection charge that comes with the rocket motor is not sufficient enough to pressurize that area, you either have to augment it with more black powder, or you have to reduce the volume. And it's a lot easier to reduce the volume. It's a lot safer to reduce the volume of the inside of your tube. And you do that just by moving that centering ring and lengthening the motor mount tube. Now, click OK there. let's go back here and load a different rocket motor in here. So now let's go to the other extreme. And this time, let's go to the length. Let's load this Cicerone I-243. Click OK. Click OK there. And let's look at it in 2D. And you see it this time. Okay, so here's that front centering ring. This right here is the parachute. Let's move the parachute. See, basically, the rocket motor is now in the same space that the parachute used to be. And so this is the other extreme. Can your rocket motor hang out the front of your motor tube? And the answer is yes, if you have room for it, that it's not going to interfere with like where you're putting your parachute. If it was a short rocket, I might be concerned, but I have a lot of room in here. I could put that parachute up here. The other option is you could put the parachute around the motor, but at that point, now you have to worry about the parachute coming out because your ejection charge usually pushes the parachute out. Now you have to eject the nose cone, and the nose cone has to pull the parachute out. And sometimes if the parachute is wedged in there really tight and the nose cone comes off, it just doesn't have enough inertia and enough mass to yank that parachute out. I've seen it happen where the parachute is wrapped around the tube and it just doesn't, the nose cone comes off, but the parachute is still inside the tube. So you do have to watch out for that. So that's the other extreme. So but the motor tube, it can be, as long as the motor is centered concentrically inside the tube, the motor can hang out the front of the motor mount tube. That is totally fine. It doesn't really matter. It's structurally fine because all the loads that the rocket motor is creating are on these back centering rings, and it's probably enough to hold it. And you can always increase the strength of those. But at some point, you know, carrying extra tube into the sky is extra weight. You don't have to have it there, so you can have your motor hang out the front. Modern high power motors and a lot of low power motors, instead of having a thrust ring inside the motor tube, those are actually built in on the back end of the motor itself. So if it's on the back end, the motor can't slide in all the way. It has to stop where that motor stop is. So then the front can hang out the front of the motor mount tube, and that's totally fine. It's cool. You can do that. Just make sure you don't scorch your parachute, or if you have to wrap your parachute around the outside, the perimeter of that motor, make sure that the nose cone can pull it off. So make sure it's still in there pretty loose. Okay, so while I was talking, there's people answering questions. Marcel says, the Archer is a nice kit, but I keep crashing mine. Mark, what are you doing? Johan from the Netherlands is here. Thank you, Johan, for showing up. And he says, I am late. He says he's having pasta, mozzarella. We have a full moon, don't we? I think it is a full moon today. So are you howling at the moon? Yeah, it hasn't come up here yet, but last night it was kind of hazy. We're here in the mountains of Colorado, and this time of year, in order to lessen the fire season for next year, they do controlled burns. And they've been doing a controlled burn in our mountains just to the west of us. And they've been making the sky kind of hazy, so our moon is kind of a hazy reddish color. It's not as bright and brilliant. I hope they get those prescribed burns done, because we've got an annular eclipse coming up on October 14th, and Colorado is in the path. And I really want to see that because that's going to be a lot of fun. Jeff Gortowski, talk about your complex clustered two-stage rocket in the design. Oh, he says, talk about your complex two-stage cluster rocket in the design folder. Okay. I'm not sure which design folder he's talking about. The Apogee components. I know what rocket he's talking about. I'm just not finding it. Where might it be? Examples of complex rockets. Oh, here we go. Oh, complex cluster two-stage rocket. There it is. So in the examples of complex rockets, we open up complex cluster two-stage. Oh, save my design. Yeah, let's save that one. Okay, so here is the rocket, but we're only showing the bottom stage. So let's show all three stages. Where's my booster? Why am I not seeing the booster stage? There we go. Okay, so let's look at it in 3D. Okay, so this was an experiment that I was doing a long time ago. I don't know how old this file is. It's got to be ancient. How would you see what the date is on that? Well, the date is it's showing the last time we updated the RockSim database, but I bet you that design is a good 12 to 15 years old. At the time, we upgraded RockSim to be able to do complex clusters. So a complex cluster, if you look at the back end of this, let me change it to 2D. I'm looking inside the rocket and I'm seeing both stages. So these blue circles are the motor mount tubes of the upper stage, and the purple circles are the motor mounts of the lower stage. And I believe there's no centering ring in here. You see there's no centering ring in these motors. So I'm seeing all the way through. That's why I'm seeing that up there. So let's throw in a centering ring back here to kind of block the view, so it'll be a little easier to see. So to create that centering ring, highlight the body tube, come over here to centering ring, and it always looks in the database, so I'm going to escape from that. And so right now it's put that centering ring right there. Let's give it some thickness, like 0.125 inches. So now it's got some thickness. And then we'll change the location, and as we slide it back, one of the things, at the time we were doing this, we wanted RockSim to have all these features that are really cool. And if you look right here, it's trying to automatically calculate the known values. So it's trying to calculate the holes, the size of the holes inside this ring. So right now this ring has an outside diameter, but it has no inside diameter, so it's a solid disc. But when I slide it back over the tubes back here, you'll see that 3 tubes will pop up right here, or 3 holes, and it will tell me the diameters of those holes. Maybe, oh, there's going to be 4, because I think this is a 4-engine cluster. So, boom. See, there's 4 engines right there, 4 holes. So 3 of the holes are 0.54 inches, and one of them is 0.98. So one of them is a BT50, and I know that because I have the history of knowing the diameters of the various size tubes. And this is a BT5 or 13 millimeter. So if I click OK, and now I go back to here, and if I look at it from the base, it obscures. No, it didn't. Maybe it did it in 3D. Yeah, in 3D it did. You see my my centering, how it looks kind of like a octagon? That is because I've got my resolution set pretty low. And to change that so it looks more circular, I think you go to Edit. In Windows, it's Edit, down to Preferences, go to 3D Rendering, and I have it set at a pretty low resolution. So if I click over here, High Resolution, you'll see that these numbers bumped up. And if I click OK, now let me go back here and refresh that screen. It didn't refresh, but it should work. It should have worked. What the heck? Anyway, it's drawing the holes in the ring as these aren't even octagons. I don't know what they are. Did I not change it? Let me double check. Preferences, 3D rendering, circumference. Yeah, it should have rendered internal sites, variable resolution. It should have took. I don't know what's going on. But normally it would, by default, it's usually set at a high resolution. So I don't know what's going on. Anyway, so in RockSim Pro, or not RockSim Pro, in RockSim, when we created this design, I was testing some of the features of RockSim at the time. And one of the new features at that time, a long time ago, was a complex cluster. And we define a complex cluster as all the tubes are different diameters in the cluster. So in this booster, I think this one right here is the internal tube, and that's the 0.98-inch diameter one, and I think that's the central one. Yeah, there we go. Central. And then there's a ring of tubes around it that are 13 millimeters. And RockSim can do that, and it's been able to do that for a long time. That's a pretty cool feature. In RockSim version 10, we made it easier to make these. But you still have to make them in 2 steps. You have to create the center one, and then you have to create the outer ones. You can't make all the tubes at the same time. And that's because you're doing 2 different tubes. So we can't confuse RockSim. And to do that, if you were interested, you would pick a body tube, and then you'd come over here to the cluster, and it would open the cluster wizard, and it would walk you through the process. So it's kind of hard to see here because I got so many motor mount tubes, but here I made a cluster of 4, and those are the blue rings. And you can see they're overlapping the outside of the tube, so they don't fit. So a cluster 4 wouldn't work, but a cluster 3 would actually work. So I took that center tube and I split it, and I made it into 3 tubes right here. And then if I click next, I don't want to change anything here, but on the next tube, I want to rotate them. See if I can see what I was trying to do is if I could get this tube to nest around this tube without them hitting. And I don't think it's going to work. I think they're going to interfere with each other. Yeah, see, it interferes with that small tube right here. So that diameter tube doesn't work, but I bet you an 18 millimeter would work. So I could have 3 18 millimeter and 3 13 millimeters in this complex cluster. And it's also a 2-stage rocket, because we have the upper stage here and the lower stage there. So when I created this rocket, I was just playing around. Did I sign my name to it? Why do they want me to hit that? There we go. Click more. Yep, I did sign my name to it. That was a good question. That was a good question. Talk about your creative. Johan says, I guessed it before. RockSim needs a deployment charge calculator built in, including the charge of low power. Yes, that's what one of the features that we're working on for the next version of RockSim and RockSim Pro is the ejection charge calculator. But it won't have the charges of the rocket motors built in because each rocket motor has its own ejection charge, and that information is not stored in the motor database. It's just not. If you want to find it, the only place that I know where it exists is on the Apogee website because we get this question a lot. So if you go to shopping on the Apogee website, you go to rocket motors, and you just pick a motor, like 38 millimeter motor, and you just open one of them up. And on every page, there's a frequently asked questions. And here is the question that's on every rocket motor page. We just put it on every motor page. And it says, how much black powder is in an ejection charge? And says, okay, for Cesaroni motors, if you're running a Pro 24 ejection charge casing, it's going to be 0.6 grams of black powder. If you're on an Aerotech, they use 0.7 grams. And this is average because the way they fill it is with a little scoop. So it's not measured by weight, it's measured by volume. There will be similar charts here for the smaller motors like the Estes motors. And those, somebody had to weigh them. I don't know who did it. We got the data from somewhere. But this is the only place on the internet where I know where ejection charge that's in the rocket motors is listed. Because that's what we do here at Apogee, is we provide that service. Marcel says, how did the 2-camera launch of the Draco BG go? So what he's talking about, a few weeks ago, we launched the Draco, this rocket right here, and we put a camera. We wanted to get a video, in-flight video, where the camera was above the nose cone and looking down. So normally you'd put your camera on the nose cone or on the tube. We built a little fixture that moved the camera off the nose cone and slightly forward of it. So imagine like two posts that were graphite rods with a little camera stuck on it, and the camera was looking down at the wings. And then we had another camera on the bottom of the rocket that was more of your traditional, I think that was actually looking forward. So we were hoping to get a video of the rocket gliding like this. And when did we do that? If you wanted to see a picture of that, you'd have to go to the archives of the RockSim training, and it was in this one, episode number 138. So if you click on that link right here, episode 138, and it says Tim takes a break from RockSim and gives a backstage look at how the studio and the videos were made. And I showed you that in that video, the Draco with that fixture on it with the camera. So we launched it the next day, and the rocket performed okay. It was a little bit nose heavy because it was hard. It's hard to trim that glider when there's a big camera sticking off the front of the nose. We thought we had it right, but it was a little nose heavy. So instead of gliding nice and flat like it normally does, It was more of a steep glide, and it launched, and the wings opened, and it glided, and it went really far. It probably went a quarter mile because it went fast. It went right into the wind, and it took off. And when it landed, because it wasn't in a nice flat glide, it was kind of nosed in a little bit, and it broke that camera mount right off. The camera went rolling, and we spent like 10 minutes looking for that camera, and we found it. The problem was both cameras didn't record. So the rocket worked fine, but we didn't get any video of it from on board. The back camera didn't work, and the front camera didn't work, and we were so pissed. We were so pissed because we wanted that so bad, because it worked. It actually worked. It was a lot of fun, but it was depressing that it didn't work. We didn't get video. Now, I was videotaping it from the ground, and I did get video of it taking off and going a long way. And that, because it was going away from me, even that wasn't exciting, because, you know, looking at the back end of a rocket that's going that way, it's not as exciting as if it would have done a nice glide in front of me. We may try it again someday, but it was a lot of work, and we don't want to damage the glider. Jeff Gortowski says, it looks like it uses one motor eject to eject a chute from inside one motor tube to recover the booster. So he's talking about this. And probably that's, if I was to fly it like in this configuration with a motor tube here and 3 outboard motors, I would do that. I would have the motor tube in the middle, eject the parachute, and the outside motors, or I would vent those outside, or kick the motors out the back, and just rely on the central motor tube. Although there is a problem that with this is a complex design, because it's a cluster. If you don't get that central motor to ignite when you launch it, then you don't have any ejection charge. So yeah, you have to make sure that central one ignites. The other option is to use all the ejection charges to push the parachute out. But this one, you could also do gap staging and ignite that top stage. And I think somebody was saying that. Johan says, "Seen my gap stage, Tim?" And I think that's kind of what he's talking about. Is you could go in here, find that motor tube in the booster. This one right here. Let's see it from the side view. See, it's right now it's really short, and if I made it long enough, I could attach it. I could use the gases to ignite an upper stage motor if it's black powder. If it's composite motor, then you have to use electronics to ignite that upper stage, because composite motors have to be ignited from the top of the motor, not the bottom. So if I was to do that, I would make the length of this one longer. You know, just bring it all the way up to there. And then the motor in the top stage would stick into here. You'd have to put vent holes on both this tube and this tube, because what happens is there's air in front of here, and it's all cold air. And you're going to take that air and you're going to push it up against the motor back here in the front, in the upper stage, and it's kind of like closing the end of a straw off and trying to blow through it. The air is just not going to go. You got to get that cold air out so that the hot gases can go in to ignite the motor. And if you look at, like we were talking about the Aerodactyl TS rocket, it does that. It has a gap and some holes in the outside of the tube so that that cold air can get out so that the hot gases can go through and ignite. Yeah, that would be a complex rocket. It would be cool to build, and I've done some like that. Save my changes? No. Over here it says, Alfred Indy says that pasta is a substitute for recovery wad egg. Terry Wheelock says, can Tim launch from the top of the mountain? Yes you can. Do I got to, oh, I don't have time to launch from the top of the mountain. We have already gone too late. Okay, experience and the chute recovers that. David Graper says, is it possible to import an open rocket design into RockSim 10? I built the kit in open rocket available, but not in RockSim format. I believe, David, that I am not an expert on open rocket. It's not our product. But from what I hear, you can export from open rocket in the RockSim format. And once you, at that point, you might be able to open it in RockSim. But I am not sure, because if they don't save it in the correct format, RockSim wouldn't recognize it and open it properly. That's all I know. We don't do open rocket. It's not our product. Mark Sell says, bummer, I enjoy the onboard videos. I got an onboard video of my crashing my Archer. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that you crashed your Archer. Well, I'm glad you got a video. At least you got some use out of the rocket. I'd love to see it. Yeah, you have to post the link somewhere so I can see it. Okay, I think that's all the questions that we had for today. There's a lot of good questions. We had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun. We'll be back again next week. I forget. Next week has got to be October 6th. So my camera looks so red today. I don't know what's going on with that camera. It looks like I got a great tan. So we'll be back next week. If you have your questions, you can email them to us in advance, or you can ask them during the chat. Again, thank you for coming. I got to find the stop button.